Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Correspondence course. Everyone in the auditorium can be seated. Welcome to all of you that are watching online. And welcome to all of you that are still coming in. Of course, tonight we said we were going to, last class, we were going to answer a question that had been sent in, or actually two questions, one question in particular. And once again, we always encourage these questions to be sent in. If you ever have any question whatsoever about something you've heard taught in a Peaceful Solution class, or you want more in-depth explanation, which we try to take the time when teaching this, and of course David, William, and Katan, and myself, we've all been teaching together probably about 17 years now, traveling literally around the world teaching character education. And we're pretty familiar with each other. And of course, we've taught so much with each other, we kind of understand the program in unison. And it's always interesting to get questions, and it's always our part to explain them. The author of the Peaceful Solution, Yisrael Hawkins, always told us that no question goes unanswered, and every question should be answered. Sometimes, though, the answer is within the class itself. And we're going to take a look tonight, and this is just for all of the teachers to recognize that people are going to ask questions, and they have that right. And that's something that we should welcome readily, and we should be able to answer those questions and make sure that we answer them precisely and explain them precisely. The one class that was in question, of course, I gave the date, and it was an email that was sent in. It was to the Men's Peaceful Solution, and it was the class given on April 26th of 2023. I'll read the question that was sent in one more time, and then we'll go through it and kind of take a look at it. We'll even take a look at that part of the class that the question is about. It says, on the subject of racism, it was stated that there is a little bit of right and a little bit of wrong in everything. It was also stated that we need to be careful not to take sides. Having been negatively affected by racism in several incidences, I would like to know, in order to understand the statement made, so please teach me what the little bit of right in racism is and the little bit of wrong is in speaking up and standing up against racism. Because I thought the Peaceful Solution was about standing up for only what is right instead of sweeping it under the rug whenever it appears. Isn't the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program supposed to teach to stop all wars, all hatred toward all peoples and nations? And of course, that's a great question that was sent in. And of course, the topic was racism. It just so occurred the teacher, I'll tell you a little bit about the teacher that was teaching that night, was David Knighton. And of course, he was teaching page 97, which is entitled Racism, in the Respect Unit. Now, a little bit about David and this topic. I really believe he's one of our best teachers to actually teach this topic for the fact of where he's lived and the communication and the people he has worked with over the years. Anybody that's ever dealt with racism is familiar with Central High in Little Rock, Arkansas. That is the high school that led to desegregation. And you can still remember the pictures of the 8 trying to go in and the National Guard trying to keep everyone away from them as people were cursing at them. And these were 8 people of color, African American, and they were being treated like trash because they wanted to go to school with everyone else. And up until that time, we had segregation in the schools. That was the school, that particular school. David lived not far from it in Benton, Arkansas. He hadn't lived there for, he wasn't born in Arkansas. He was born in California, but had moved to Arkansas. And through teaching the Peaceful Solution, they actually requested him to come and start teaching at that high school, which led to every year we took about 25 teachers to teach for 2 days there. So, and that took place every year up until COVID. And after COVID, we haven't went back due to the fact we deal more on an international scale. And a lot of people really fell in love with Zoom and Skype, and it kind of never changed. We have a lot of Zoom classes, a lot of Skype classes, and a lot of people watch these classes right off of Facebook or our website itself. So the database we built up has really helped a lot. So David's very familiar with teaching the topic of racism. And he's very familiar with teaching it in some of the most, I could say active areas, or where it's the most prominent, or where it's probably recognized in the United States the most, because Little Rock Central High, if you are not familiar with it, look it up. Everyone should know what took place there and all the importance that took place, because a lot of people born after that time probably don't realize that there was a time when only whites went to schools here, and this is how they described it. Whites went here and blacks went here. There were even signs above water fountains. Whites only, blacks only. There was a time when the white people ate in the front of the restaurant and the black people were made to go to the back of the restaurant. Now, what's positive about that? Absolutely nothing. There's not one positive thing about belittling or treating someone in a way to make them feel as though they have less value due to the color of their skin or the origin of their country. And racism runs much deeper than just the color of skin. You can have, as David explained in this class, and I really encourage everyone to go back and watch that class given on April 26th of 2023, because he even explained how racism, you can have two white people or two black people, as they like to describe it. I think the technical terms now are African American and Caucasian. But if you take those two, you can have someone from the north and someone from the south, and they'll still dislike each other. We had a civil war over that in the United States back in the 1800s. So it doesn't even necessarily go with color of skin. And then you had the Hatfields and McCoys, and they hated each other just for the fact of their bloodline. And then you look over to see what's taking place in Palestine and Israel right now. Then it's going up into Syria, Yemen getting involved, Iran getting involved, Turkey's wanting to get involved. And then you look into Saudi Arabia and Iran. These are people of pretty much the same type of lineage. It's just one's one denominational or one brand, as they like to say, and the other one's another one. So they dislike each other just because of their bloodlines. But I want to play with the question that I asked. And once again, let me put this back in your mind again, because this was a specific question. On the subject of racism, it was stated there is a little bit of right and a little bit of wrong in everything. It also was stated that we need to be careful not to take sides. So at this time, if we could please go ahead and play. It's only about a 2-minute clip.
But let's move on to procedure number 6 right now. It says to tell students that in addition to crime, racism is another way in which disrespect manifests itself within our society. So it's another way in which it shows up. For something to manifest, it means that, it could have been hidden or not very well noticed, but now it's manifest. It's showing itself. It's raising its ugly head. So in addition to the crime, racism is another way in which disrespect manifests itself within our society. And, this was written many, many, many years ago, but right now, in fact, over the past few years, I think we've seen a lot of media attention given to racism, actually. And there's a lot going on. The riots and all that take place, the disrespect is rampant. Everybody disrespecting each other out there on the street, rioting and carrying on. And, we have to watch our own attitudes. We might see something and we might see something on the news and think, well, these people are wrong or these people are right. We need to be careful not to take sides, because it's almost like the Democrat and Republican and, that type thing. We got to be careful not to take sides. You can see in everything there's a little bit of right. You could find something right in just about everything, and you can find a lot of wrong in those things too, just like the Republican and Democrat, just like the black and white and Asian or whatever. Everybody's got some points that sound very logical, So you have to be careful. Don't take sides, but don't fall into that to where you become a, quote, racist.
Now, when you listen to what he said, now granted, that's only 2 minutes of an hour class that he taught. And I've watched that class many times. And even with what we just cut out right there, I still understand completely what he's saying. And if you notice, he said there's a little bit of right and a little bit of wrong in just about everything. And if you continue to listen to his class, racism is not one of those things that have a little bit of right and a little bit of wrong. Murder doesn't have a little bit of right and a little bit of wrong. Rape does not have a little bit of right and a little bit of wrong. Child abuse, spousal abuse, we can go make a list of things that don't have a little bit of right and a little bit of wrong. It's just completely wrong. But also it's very important with a lot of things that were taking place that he was referring to was like George Floyd in Minnesota. People were disgusted by that. They had a right to be. People were disgusted by other people, and I don't remember all of the names of the people that were dying. I know there was a woman in Kentucky that was shot. And it was just a whole list of people that seemed to be making the news. But, that hasn't stopped. It's just it's not making the news because bigger things are making the news now. It's kind of like you almost forget about Ukraine because you're looking at Palestine and Israel. And before Ukraine, it was Southern Sudan and Sudan, or the United States dealing with someone else. But when we're talking about, and specifically when David was talking about it, when you listen to the class, he was speaking about the people that were upset at the death of George Floyd were right. They had every right to be upset. And really, it shouldn't have determined whether you were upset or not by the color of your skin. If it did, that's racism. If you're only upset because someone black was done that way and someone white wasn't, you might want to go back and reevaluate yourself. It doesn't matter whether that person was black, white, Asian, Korean, Hispanic, Latino. It doesn't matter. That was a life and a person that should never have been done that way. But you know what? This takes place every day. And I'm not saying it's right, and I'm not trying to justify it. Sad part about society, and this is where the responsibility unit's going to come in that we'll just barely get into tonight. This is where society slips. When we think that we can see an answer to a matter or an answer to a situation. By saying there's a little bit of right in what people stand for, you can look at organizations, whether it be the Black Panthers, the Ku Klux Klan. There's a number of different organizations that are out there. And I can tell you, if you study them, their mission statement, so to speak, or the intention of what they were created for to begin with, has changed drastically over the years. You should go back and research some of those things, because what you see today compared to what the originators, the ideology of it was created for, is very different than what you see today. But there is a little bit of right when people want to put an end to something. And there's nothing wrong when you look and say, I'm someone that's African American and I don't appreciate African Americans being treated this way. There's nothing wrong with that. But you also have to be of the same mind. I don't agree with Asians being treated this way. I don't agree with Middle Eastern people being treated this way, or Latinas. I don't agree with Germans, French, Europeans in general. I don't agree with anyone being treated this way. I don't care what color of skin they have. I don't care whether they're a male or a female. That's truly what he was really getting into, is everybody's got a little bit of positive, but with that little bit of positive in their stances, these groups, there's an abundance of negative. And I won't even get into the Ponzi scheme, and this is what most people call it, of things like Black Lives Matter. Black lives do matter, 100%. And if they matter, you shouldn't be starting organizations and buying $8 and $10 million homes all across the United States. That's the lot of wrong, where the statement that's made, it's very true. Every life matters. But it's nothing wrong with saying Black Lives Matter. That's a true statement. But when you create an organization just to make money off of that, no, the ideology behind teaching people lives matters is great. But if you don't do anything positive but make money for yourself, which is not a positive thing, then there's a lot of wrong in that little bit of right. So it's just like as he compared it to the Democrats and Republicans. There's a lot of people that they want to do something. We've met with a lot of them. And there's some that have great intentions. But one thing you learn in Washington, D.C., and this is probably where, if you've never been to Washington, D.C., and you've never dealt with congressmen and congresswomen and senators, you probably don't understand the mindset of what David was saying with some of that. We've had great people that have helped us over the years. Individually, they helped us in the communities. You try to get something done in Washington, D.C., one person is not going to get you very far. If you've ever seen how Congress and Senate can't even elect a Speaker of the House, that's what takes place when you try to get something morally passed through the Congress or the Senate. One person can petition it for you, but they have to get the backing of an enormous amount of people. So there's a little bit of right and a lot of bit of wrong. And sadly, what usually revolves around a lot of bit of wrong is money. So going back through, I want to go through and I want to hit a couple points that David taught that night. And this is literally what he said about racism. And I want you to decide for yourself if there's anything right about racism. And then we'll answer that question. But is there anything right about racism? Is there ever a time racism can be used in a positive way? Well, let's look a little bit about it. If you have your respect units, which you might not, we put slides up for you because I told everybody to bring the responsibility units. But this is on page 97. Page 97 of the respect unit. And if we could go ahead and go to our next slide. It's entitled Racism. And of course, this was in chapter 4. This is on page 97, chapter 4. And it says, in chapter 3, you learned that science has proven there is only one race, the human race. You also learned that there is value in the existence of all human beings, regardless of where they were born, the color of their skin, or the cultural practices. When people in society ignore or refuse to accept these facts, the result is disharmony, fear, and a society that cannot function at its optimal best. Disrespect for others because of their nationality or cultural belief is called racism. Racism promotes an ideology that there is a difference in the value of human existence and gives a false impression that one group of people is superior to another. Racism is an unreasonable hatred directed at an individual or an entire group of people and is expressed in many ways, such as prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination. Regardless of how it is expressed, racism in our society devalues the life and worth of others. It can lead to violence and aggression and destroys the trust and respect that must, and I'm sure everybody has that word must underlined in their book, must exist between people if there is to be peace, unity, and harmony in society. So once again, just listen. Is there any way you can find something positive in what we just read just in that section on racism? Well, it talked about being prejudiced. And, of course, being prejudiced, when you look over, it would be down the bottom of page 97. This will be on the next slide. So if you can put the next slide up, please. It says prejudice literally means to judge something or someone without first getting and examining all of the facts. Prejudice in our society can manifest itself as an irrational suspicion or hatred of a particular group of people. And notice here the block at the bottom of that page. It says racism is a false concept that comes from a lack of understanding and hate. Now, hate, is there any positive character that you can find in that word hate? About the only time I've ever heard someone get something even close to it was, well, I hate when people don't try to practice positive character. Well, you can dislike it. Hate's a very strong word. And of course, hate is something when you see people being killed right now, people being slaughtered, and everybody's arguing, well, which life is more important? But this is, it kind of blows me away. And this is the part that really confuses my mind. We have October 7th, you had an attack in Israel. And then, of course, Palestine supposedly did this, or Hamas, Hezbollah, you can throw all of them in there. And everybody goes to Israel. CBS, NBC, ABC, all of the nightly news people, that's where they're reporting from. what about all of the people being killed here in our country alone? You never see them running out there unless it's something that will gain attention. They'll go to Minnesota. They went to Ferguson, Missouri. But what about the people that are dying? In this class, David was showing how many people would die during that class alone and how many murders take place every few minutes. But you don't see people going out to do that. That is a breakdown in society, and that's the confusion in society. We see what just took place in Maine with a man going through shooting a lot of people. Then they find him supposedly a self-inflicted wound. That's the last I read in the news, and that's literally what it said, was supposedly. So that's what I'm saying. Whether he did or not, I don't know, but I'm sure they'll determine that very easily. That gets attention. But what about these other situations that never garner attention? And of course, racism in itself being a false concept, well, Peaceful Solution teaches you need to get all the facts. There's no falsehood when you get all the facts. And getting all the facts means, remember on page 8 of the character unit, you do nothing that brings harm to yourself, someone else, or the environment. And there's only one race, that's the human race. You know, William taught at a class a long time ago, and it's always stuck in my mind. We were down in Laredo, Texas, and he made mention, he taught the students, and he was asking them about the different colors, you know, people are black, people are white, and the students were like, oh, yeah. And William said, well, it's the human race. And there was some students, oh, no. You've got Mexicans, you got Americans, you got this, you got that. And then he said, well, if you have a dog running through your yard, what do you call it? What's a dog? And a couple said, oh, perro, you know, Spanish for dog. Well, if you have a cat run through your yard, you know, what do you call it? Oh, cat. If you have a human running through your yard, what do you call it? Well, it depends on whether he's black or white or green or purple. No, it's a human. That's exactly what it is. But we've been trained to do this. We've actually been taught racism, and most likely from some things that's being unintentionally done, but society has taught racism very easily. You know, I don't think that, well, there was a black dog come through my yard, or a white dog came through my yard. That could possibly be to identify it, but that's just to identify it. Humans aren't talked about that way. When you say that about a person, I have a close friend here that lives in this community, and he's been taking Peaceful Solution classes for many years, and he's very dark. Where his lineage comes from is Africa. And I remember him telling me when he first came to Texas to start training in the Peaceful Solution, when he would go into a store, everyone would watch him. Like a gas station, you know, there's smaller stores, not like Walmart's, but the smaller stores. And he said, you just know that they were going to look at him like he was going to steal something. And he said he noticed that everyone else could come in the store and wouldn't pay any attention to them, but they'd sure look at him. And as David brought out in this class, if you were, how would you like to have been a Muslim or someone from Saudi Arabia or anywhere in that area of the world, and you were needing to get on a plane September 13th of 2001 or September 14th? We have a teacher, used to have a teacher, he's passed away since, from Trinidad and Tobago. He looked very Arabic. Even though his lineage was from India, he looked very Arabic. And I remember him telling me his first flight after September 11th, when he came up to one of our conferences, he said that everybody looked at him like he was getting ready to do something really bad. And he said he felt so uncomfortable because people watched him the whole flight. No matter what he did, he was looked at like he was going to do something negative the whole flight. Now, who put that in the minds of the people? And once again, did they teach racism when they did it? Is it true that all Arab people are looking to fly planes into the World Trade Center? No, it's not. It's not at all. But we put that in the mind, and what do we do when we do that? Well, we teach hate. That's exactly what we're doing. We teach hate. Now, I want to read you the definition for hate as the Peaceful Solution defines it, or hateful. And this is the next slide. An intense emotion that results in extreme dislike and hostility. Now, an intense emotion. What did that emotion start with? Started with a thought. Well, who put that thought in your mind? Remember, we're told to guard our thoughts. Remember what it said about influences. Be very careful about what you allow to influence you. They come in and out of your mind constantly. Be extremely careful and never underestimate the power of an influence. That's what we learned on page 68 of the character unit. Hate is derived from fear, anger, or perceived injury. For example, some people are raised to believe that people who have a different skin color should be hated. Well, people can say, well, I've never taught my child to hate anyone. Not at all. You can just let them watch the news sometimes and they can be taught to hate someone. Sometimes it's literally not sitting down and having a conversation, as the Peaceful Solution does, about what exactly is taking place in society and why should George Floyd, very popular name from Minnesota when he died, or the young man in Ferguson, Missouri, why was all of these things negative? Why was it a bad thing? And then, of course, why did people try to destroy the city? Well, let's look at the next slide. The next slide is the definition of discrimination. And it means to deny another equal respect, rights, and opportunities because of their color, place of birth, religion, age, gender, and cultural practices. Discrimination is also experienced by people who are physically or mentally challenged. For example, the physically or mentally challenged people who have been denied jobs and housing based solely on the fact that they are classified that way. So, discrimination takes place in many different forms, not just necessarily the color of skin. It can take place due to a handicap a person has, the lack of ability that a person might have through, they could have something, a medical condition that does not allow them to process things as fast as other people. You know, but I've seen on the news and I've seen where people with Down syndrome have worked at fast food restaurants and done a great job. And, you know, it's something that we tend to, they're just working at McDonald's or they're just working at a whatever other restaurant. I don't even came from Burger King, you know. But you think that's a little job. Go work at one of those places one time during rush hour. That's a pretty fast-paced job, you know, and for that person to do that. And I remember seeing one young man on the news, he had worked there for like 20 years. And they had cutbacks, and they went to let him go. And when they let him go, and it was a new manager that had come in, had no prior knowledge of what was being done, they let the young man go, and everybody walked out in that restaurant that was working there. They said, if you fire him, we're not working here. You know, and that man made a decision, not even considering that young man's been doing that job 20 years. And you're letting him go? Well, he let him go because he's seen his medical disability. They didn't even consider how well he did his job. That's what he made his decision based on. And that's a very sad fact in society. Going over to the next slide, it says many people in our society have lost their lives because of racism. So we're talking about people dying now. Is there any positive thing that brings forth death? No, not one thing. Unless people begin to value life, which means they're not valuing life, many more people will die. Racism has robbed millions of their right to live, so it's stolen from them. It has taken from them. That's negative character, because it usually results in violence. Keep in mind that violence and aggression are the worst forms of disrespect. Disrespect is the opposite of respect. Everyone deserves respect. That's the very beginning of page 1 of the respect unit. Everyone, all life deserves respect, whether plant or animal. And we even go into detail how the dead even deserve respect by processing bodies in a proper way. So violence sends a loud, clear message that someone's life and well-being are worthless. So think about it for a moment. Can you think of any situation going on right now where it seems like nobody cares who lives and who dies? If you watch the news lately today, I'm amazed at what comes out of the mouth of people. Here we have, if you watch the news, all you see is Israel and Palestine. And people are dying over there constantly. And of course, you have some that are pro-Israeli and some that are pro-Palestinian. And they both have a little bit of right to what they're saying, and they both have a little bit of wrong or a lot of wrong. And then the conversation all started out today was Palestine doesn't stand for gay rights and Israel does. Therefore, they should back Israel. And I thought, where does that comment come from when people are dying? Are you telling me because someone has a belief that this shouldn't be practiced in their culture, that they should be annihilated? Is that what's being said or what? That's like racism at its worst. You're literally saying that we need to wipe out an entire culture because they choose to live their life this way, but this culture wants to live their life another way, and that's okay. That's not very balanced in measuring how you decide things. But that's the things that are coming forth. And here on page 107 of the Respect Unit, sounds a little bit like bullying. And I'm not saying who's being bullied either. In that, there's a lot of wrong. I'd have to search for the right, but there's a lot of wrong going on in that situation. But on the next slide, notice it says, like bullying, other acts of disrespect have serious consequences, such as loss of friends, bad reputation, detention, suspension, expulsion from school. Racists, for example, who choose not to accept that all people have the right to live in our society will suffer from the natural consequences of their hate. They will never know the peace of being able to accept others. Eventually, their disregard for others could lead to acts of disrespect in the form of verbal or physical abuse, which could lead to the forced consequences of a jail or prison sentence. And, when you think about that, that's why that question that was sent in was so important, because in the question, if you noted, it was very personal to that person. They had experienced racism. They had experienced what it was like to be devalued and to be looked at as worthless because of the color of their skin. And there's never, ever, ever a time where that is okay. There's never a time that's positive. There's never a time that it's allowed or should be allowed. And the examples that David was given, where there's a little bit of right and a little bit of wrong in everything, if you go back and listen, he was talking about the stances that people are taking. There's a little bit of right in what they're doing, but there's a lot of wrong in what they're doing. If there was no wrong in it, there would be no hate. There would be no hurt. There would be no violence. We would have peace. That's what we would get from a situation where there's no wrong. We would have complete peace. But there is a lot of wrong going on in that. And to move on from the racism and to deal with one last thing really quickly, I do want to address a question that was sent in. Does the peaceful solution teach that COVID started in a lab in Wuhan, China? No, the peaceful solution does not teach that. The peaceful solution has never taught that. And the peaceful solution will never teach that. The peaceful solution is we very clearly teach. The author was very clear in his teachings. This individual, the author of the peaceful solution, taught many classes over his life, wrote many books in his literature. Everything is written the same. For 87 years he did this. That was his life, teaching for 40 plus years. And I want to show you the ridicule and the hate this man suffered by teaching how diseases truly start. Just to give you an idea. On page 1 of the character unit, this is what we put in. It says a few sad facts about life, or of life. And this was page 1 of the character unit. This is where we started back in November 2020. It says, in a way, it's sad that we live in a society that puts so much emphasis on what people look like on the outside. That also deals with racism. Whether they're popular, pretty, cute, athletic, tall, short, or fat, as if those are the things that really matter. It's even sadder that we sometimes feel forced to spend so much time fixing, molding, and changing our outer appearance, the way we dress, speak, and walk, just to fit in to be like everyone else. The saddest fact of all is, in the long run, changing the outside just to fit in without improving who we are on the inside has caused many disappointments, lost friendships, and created bad scenes. And when you think about that, just think it for a moment. If you took everyone who was white and made them black and everyone who was black and made them white, would you stop racism after that? Nope. They just changed the flavor. It would change what's there. Once again, the peaceful solution teaches there's one human race. Color of your skin is irrelevant. The country you're from is irrelevant. The language you speak is irrelevant. It's truly about your decision making. But this right here, this was written back in 2002. In case you're wondering what a bad scene is, it's the 1 million teenage pregnancies a year, or the 25,000 teens who are diagnosed HIV positive every year in the United States alone, the thousands more who die in drunk driving accidents, and hundreds of thousands of teenagers who have to suffer through the divorce of their parents. Now, he was ridiculed because that was one of the very first places where we started teaching in the Peaceful Solution that sexually transmitted diseases will destroy life. And the author of the Peaceful Solution went into detail and showed, we're talking 25, 30 years ago, how committing these acts of doing things without considering what it's bringing on you, and we've went through this a lot in the self-control unit, we talked about it in the acceptance unit, the character unit, we've talked about the 125 STDs that were available at that time to anyone who was of the taking, but there are many more now. And now, the author of the Peaceful Solution also taught, and I'm going to show you, not yet, I don't want to show the slide yet, because this is going to be a slide that, this is why we have separate classes in the Peaceful Solution. And I do want everybody that's watching online to understand the next slide I'm going to show you, it's just the headline that came forth in the news today. Literally today, this came across the news, but it's very explicit. It's very to the point. But this is something the author of the Peaceful Solution was trying to teach 30 years ago, and he was ridiculed. He was made fun of. A lot of people said that, why does your character education program have to talk about STDs? Why? Well, because it's destroying lives. It's killing people. You know, and I remember the first time that he taught, throat cancer is coming from HPV. Oh, no, it's not. It's coming from alcohol and tobacco. That's where it's coming from. Well, if we could show the next slide, and once again, I'm going to read it. It's pretty explicit. But this is literally the headline. This is from dailymail.com. Doctors imply oral sex has surpassed smoking and alcohol as greatest risk factor for throat cancer. Dr. Daria Sadavokia said men are more at risk by performing, we'll just say certain tasks on women. Women more likely to carry HPV in their genital area, which can cause cancer. Now, this is what scientists are just now coming out and saying. This literally came out today. Now, when you think about what's being said here with character education and what we're saying with there's no positive in racism, you would think that we've lived long enough in society to know that, no, you can't get a positive out of being racist. You just can't do it. You know, Abraham Lincoln, he kind of tried to separate some people and make everyone feel as though they could live in unison, and you see what that earned him. You know, people hated that to the point he was shot. And if you remember the Peaceful Solution, Martin Luther King, Abraham Lincoln, those are two people that are considered a people that had positive status about them. They stood for positive things. Did that mean everything they stood for was positive? No, not everything. There was a little bit of right and a little bit of wrong on what they stood for. But some of the things they stood for that were right really have value. But both of them died for what they stood for that was right. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated because some of the things he stood for was right. He was correct in what he said. And people hated him, and he was murdered for it. Going to the next slide, and this is page 120 from the character unit. And this is actually the author of the Peaceful Solution. He's pondering a thought for everybody else to ponder with him. He said, imagine if the people of these two nations, speaking of Palestine and Israel, was the ones he was speaking of at the time, but take anything, these two races, these two countries, anything. Two different things. If they were educated in the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, what a tremendous difference it would make in their lives. Imagine if all the nations whose difference, getting calls from the Philippines. He's a close friend to mine and William. What a tremendous difference it would make in their lives. Imagine if all of the nations who are in conflict would begin to incorporate these positive moral character traits when interacting with each other. The ripple effect from this would be awesome. The fighting and wars would end. People would be able to live in peace without the threat of violence to rob them of their property, lives, or the lives of their children. Instead of spending billions of dollars on military and nuclear weapons, we would feed the hungry and find cures for the hundreds of diseases that kill thousands of people each year. Do not underestimate the importance of a positive moral character in the life of an individual, society, and the world. A positive character is to be valued and maintained by all people if we want our world to be a safe and secure place for everyone. And with that being said, where does racism fit into a world that is living according to the peaceful solution? It doesn't. It's completely eradicated. Racism is something that should be eradicated from society, and the devaluing of human beings should be gone. But teaching that the lives of an Israeli is more important than a Palestinian, or that a life of a Palestinian is more important than an Israeli, that's no better than teaching racism. It's exactly what it is. It's racism. And whenever we start standing for, well, it's all right that we go into Gaza, or we go here, we do this, we do that. I mean, this has already bled up into Syria, it's in Lebanon, and it's just spreading out. And this is one thing to watch. Watch what the world leaders are saying and look to see who has the answer. Look to see who's trying to use a peaceful solution. Now, they use that term a lot. What we need is a peaceful solution. Well, the UN got their shot this week, and it didn't work out too well. What they went back to was wearing stars of World War II. That's pretty much what took place at the UN this week. So with that in mind, we're going to get to the introduction of the responsibility unit tonight. And of course, it comes with a couple different covers. This is the one that I brought tonight. And of course, that's the author of the Peaceful Solution, actually when he was going through and pre-fruiting the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. So that was actually during the time this program was being put together. Now, turning over, opening your books, and if you don't have a book, you can download them on Facebook right now. It's there. I did check to make sure. We have the overview, the character, the acceptance, the self-control, the respect, and the responsibility is there. They're all teacher's manuals, well, except for the overview. The overview is just a kind of an overview of the whole program in general, from the pre-K all the way up to the parenting and workplace manual. And that's something you should download too. It's only 26 pages, but it gives you insight of what the program is about. But the responsibility unit's there for you to download. It's a teacher's manual. And of course, they come with a couple different covers. And turning over to, it's Roman numeral 13. It's XIII. That's after we get through the table of contents and we have the preface. And of course, this is the same in every junior high series. But I want to go through this just reading it one more time to get the ideology, because we talked about ideology. We talked about ideology of racism. And, of course, we want to express the ideology and why we truly feel the peaceful solution is the way to make a difference in society. And this is what we're trying to get across. And this is what teachers, as you're teaching this program, it's not just something to fill space. It's not just something because you have extra time and you need a subject to fill it in with. It's literally taught to make lives better, to help people to choose a better way of living. Now, someone could ask, are you saying that the peaceful solution could eradicate racism? Well, yes, it could, but you have to put it into practice. Basically, you're asking, can we eradicate hate? Is it an easy job? Just turn on the TV and look. No, it's not. You can't even eradicate hate out of the, we live in a city here not far away that's only 150,000 people. There's murders, there's stabbings, there's all kinds of stuff going on just in our city. Doesn't mean that people are promoting it. Now, in the little community we live in out here is a lot different. We live in a community where most people out here actually attend these classes. They come to the auditorium or they watch them online. That makes a big difference when you can get more people watching this. And I know there's an enormous amount of people watching online right now in many different countries that are wanting to make a difference in their area. And yes, it does start with one person, and then 2, and then 5, and then 10, and then 50, and then 100, and it spreads out from there. But once again, this is here the influence from the teacher. And this started out with one person. Thinking back on my early school years, I remembered many of the things taught by my teachers that were not part of the regular curriculum. It was those teachings that influenced my thinking. Many of them still guide my actions today. Now, there's a hint given in that, his thinking and, of course, his actions, because we know everything starts with a thought to a feeling and then an action. I remember very early in my childhood, even before my school years, things my parents taught me that actually guided my interaction with others. One statement I heard more than once from my father in the face of some frustrating event was, "Son, two wrongs don't make a right." And you can explore that comment right there. You can write that somewhere, and you will never find where you can get a wrong or two wrongs to make a right. It's just not possible. Unless you think, I hit my finger once and it hurts, so I'm going to hit it again for hurting me. Now, if you think that will make it right, then you can try it, but you're going to hurt even more. And, one thing that I was speaking with someone who's another Peaceful Solution instructor, and when you have a wrong, that's something that hurts. And when you do it twice, that means it hurts more, no matter what it is. If it's wrong to do it one time, it's even twice as bad to do it two times. So there's no way you can ever get a positive from two negatives. It's just not possible. But continuing on here, it said, had my father's words not been mentioned in my hearing, so that thought been put into his mind. If you have one of the latest copies of these books, that is underlined for you. You don't even need a teacher to tell you to underline it. That is underlined for you. It says, but other more damaging words, such as get even, fight back. I'll never forgive you for that. I'll get you for that. That sounds like the news I watched today, almost all day today. He says, I might have treated others differently. In my life, I have seen many people retaliate, children, adults, and nations. However, I have never seen peace brought by someone doing wrong to another after that person did wrong to them. Teachers greatly influence our future leaders. This means teachers have a major impact on the outcome of the world's future. Just a few words placed in a person's mind at a proper time can actually guide that person's thinking for the rest of his or her life. A morally sound, wise, caring teacher can help 1, 10, or 10,000 students on their way to becoming morally sound, wise, caring adults. Reading the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program to any student will mean a lot, influencing the student with the personal determination to leave the classroom with the wisdom and knowledge found in these books will mean everything in the student's life. Everyone needs direction, and if you didn't have that underlined or you don't have it underlined, underline it now, because that's true. Without direction, we've already talked about, well, no, we haven't. We haven't got to that book, so I'm not going to mention it yet. But it's hard to accomplish goals. We did cover that in acceptance unit. Without direction, you can't accomplish goals. So everyone needs direction, but the early teen years are those when children actually seek direction primarily from those outside the home. Most children during these years feel that they know everything that their parents know. Therefore, they will listen more closely to those outside the home, thinking that they will learn things that their parents don't know. And if you've never had the honor of dealing with someone like that, you will eventually. The stage is therefore set because the teacher is exalted in the minds as one having the answers. Hence, we dedicate these books to the teachers and the world leaders of tomorrow. The trust we place in you is the ultimate sacrifice. We place our children's lives in your hands because we know you will influence them positively. We are confident that they will be the beneficiaries of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program with your influence. That's a letter from the author, Yisrael Hawkins. And of course, when you think about that, look at what we've seen without the Peaceful Solution being taught. Now, just to give you a mindset, this was a man born during the Dust Bowl in 1934, in August of 1934, and he was alive to see the nuclear bomb, two of them dropped on, or atomic bomb dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He was alive to see that. Now, that was a devastating time, and we've referenced it's a documentary called White Light, Black Rain, and we've referenced that and recommended people watch that. It's the testimony of people that lived through it. They didn't just see it, they lived it. And the horrific destruction that was brought on them through cancer and just the devastation of families, entire families lost, entire communities destroyed. And they never wanted to go back that way again. They were set. This is not something we want to do. And I've heard somebody go, well, see, that right there was wrong, but it brought peace. If you really think the people that had the bomb dropped on them were the ones that were pushing the war, you're very wrong. That would be like saying that, well, you know, the people that were in the World Trade Center working that day, they were supporting the affliction going on over in Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan and everywhere else. That's kind of discriminating, isn't it? It's not true. Might make society feel better, but it's not a true statement. But looking here to the introduction, it says the Peaceful Solution Character Education Incorporated is pleased to introduce you to the most unique, effective, and practical character education program available today. You are holding a teaching tool that is guaranteed to minimize crime and violence, social disunity, and moral degradation in the classroom, home, and community. One person asked, what guarantee do you have? If you use it, it works. If you don't use it, it doesn't work. And that was a slogan the Peaceful Solution used to have, the author created. The only way the Peaceful Solution will not work in your life is if you just don't use it. That's the only way it won't work. Most people are involved in some kind of religion today, so when they express morality, they tend to be guided by what they've been taught by their churches, temples, synagogues, or mosques. This is something we must guard against in public schools because of the present laws concerning church and state. And very quickly, not to add to this, but right now you have different religions in Israel. And you have different teachings in the synagogues, the mosque, and other churches, whatever. And you can see what the ideology that's being taught in this. So I'm not trying to speak bad about religion, not even trying to discuss religion, but the ideology that can be taught in some things can actually lead to immediate hate for other people because that person is of this culture, or that person is of this culture. It's the same reason why the Temple Mount is such a huge debate and has always been a debate. It's based on religion and it's based on culture differences. And there's a lot of people have died over these things. But when we talk about morality, the Peaceful Solution, we're literally dealing with what shows value, what shows appreciation, how you can conduct yourself without harming yourself, someone else, or the environment. And you don't need to know a person's religion to treat them with respect. You don't need to know their religion to have a moral attitude in the way you conduct yourself with them. This is talking about individualizing this ourselves. And this will spread out. If people that think things can't spread need to go back and look at COVID one more time. COVID spread really fast. And if you could spread character education that fast, it takes education, it takes acceptance, but it's possible. Continuing on here, it says, we ask that you be aware of the fact that these lessons are designed only for the purpose of developing the student's character. These lessons teach proper, acceptable character education in a way that will penetrate and change the heart and mind of a student or adult. This program will produce the results in young people that society desires to see. They desire to see it, but we're not seeing it right now, but everyone wants to see this. We have noticed that these lessons are even more effective when the teacher encourages the practice of the principles of the lessons throughout the day as incidents arise between teacher and student or student and student. So it needs to be put into action, not just talked about, but put into action. Please remember that your class will be an example simply because character education is introduced into the school curriculum. And then, of course, here in the next section, teachers are true leaders of the world. Teachers are the true leaders of the world. All teachers now have the opportunity to make a great change in the character of their students. With the use of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, you are not only teaching, you are actually molding leaders who will use what you are instilling in them to bring about better living conditions in this world. We must not fail to build moral values in the students we are now teaching. Doesn't mean that if they don't pick it up and run with it, that doesn't mean you shouldn't teach it. You should still teach it as a teacher. And, of course, people are going to change. They're going to turn. Nobody cares about someone stealing until they're stolen from themselves. You know, it's kind of like, and I say this, and I don't say this lightly. I've met people and talked to people about a family member that was murdered. And they look at murder a totally different way than someone that's never had someone close to them murdered. And those two people look at it a very different way than someone who actually committed that act and bitterly regrets it after they've done it. And you have three different situations, and there's three very different ways of looking at it. And yes, there are people that have committed those acts. When you're a peaceful solution instructor, you meet them, and there's a lot of regret in it. And you know what? They don't get the ability to go back and undo it, but they still can become a better person. And some people, this is 3 seconds of their life you're talking about. It's not like they went around doing this their whole life. And we met someone that he literally, all he could do was sit there at 15 years old and say, I don't know why I did it. I was just mad. It literally, I just snapped at that time and I did it. He said, I didn't even think about it, but he did. He was processing them. But in the time that he thought about it, it was just a matter of seconds. He wasn't thinking about the outcome of the consequences of his actions. He wasn't being responsible. And that's what we're going to get into. This responsibility unit teaches us that we need to consider everything. So once again, it says we must not fail to build moral values in the students that we are now teaching. This will not just reflect in the child, but in the entire world around us. That is, your leadership will be reflected in the actions of the leaders that you have taught and will teach. And, of course, continuing on, we have the how to use this program. And I'm just going to read a little bit of this really quickly to explain it, and then we'll close, and that will let William be able to start off with this, because this book it really brings everything together. And how to use the program, this is why it's so important. And it's extremely important. You've always heard us teach, and it's one reason I had a comment to say, but we have a class that's done out of what we call the Building Moral Excellence unit. And there was some things that we covered in that class this week, but that book comes after this one. So there was something I wanted to say, but I'll hold off onto it until we get to that book. And it's really important because there's rules to teaching this program. And if you see here, how to use the program, it's the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, consists of 5 units that cover character, acceptance, self-control, respect, and responsibility. And this is very important right here. Each unit is designed and formatted to gently lead the student with the basic concepts of character development to becoming a responsible citizen in society. It is important that you, the teacher, work through these units in the order presented to obtain maximum benefit. That's why 3 years ago, not to the day, but to this month, we started with the character unit. Then we went through the acceptance, and then the self-control, then the respect and responsibility. Whenever we're teaching these, we have taught all of these books many, many times. And you throw in the workplace manual, the parenting manual, and then grade 5 of the Peaceful Solution is one of the most amazing books you can ever use. And then you have other books that we have tied into that. But when we're teaching, you're limited to what you're teaching. You can't get ahead of your lesson plan. You can't, they say like give the spoiler to the movie. With the Peaceful Solution, it's not allowed. You have to work through it as you're teaching it. Even though you know, hey, this right here is important, you should know this. You have to gently lead each and every person through this. And this is the instructions of the author who had a brilliant mind. And he taught people for many years. And that one person, this is why I say one person can make a difference. That one person who got together with 50 teachers and parents, now has a program in 29, 30 different countries being translated into 4 different languages. That's what one person's vision can actually accomplish. But when we do it, has to be done the way he said do it, and that's when we get the maximum benefit. He did this with a lot of experience. Of course, then you have here, it explains about the, let me finish this. It says, so work through these units so you have the benefit. It says, as you explore each unit, you will realize that the issues covered are very relevant to our young people, also relevant to the older people. Take as much time as you can to explain the concepts, reiterate where and when possible, and solicit as much student participation as possible. So then we have the teacher's manual, the purpose and objective and procedure, and that's taught to you when we go through the lesson plan itself. So I'm going to stop at that point right there. But once again, when it talks about the concepts, and a lot of people ask, well, why do you teach these if they're written to teenagers? Why do you teach these in prisons? Why do you teach these to adults? We've been in many prisons before teaching, and we've always had the prisoners tell us, no one told me anything like that when I was growing up. They actually, you can see them going back to when they were young, and they realized where it went wrong. There was a lot of information that was left out that was very much needed, but they didn't get it. So we're going to stop at that point. William's going to be able to begin this book and teaching this. So everyone, if you don't have your responsibility unit, please download your copy or get a copy of the teacher's manual, and we're going to continue along at that time. The next class will be 11/5. It'll be this coming Sunday at 5:30. The teacher will be William. So once again, bring your responsibility unit. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email your questions to us at any time. Thank you very much.